With common sense for the Commonwealth, it's the John Fredericks Morning Show. Like us on Facebook. Follow John on the new Twitter handle @JF Radio Show. And online, the website, thejohnfredericsshow.com. Listen online anywhere, anytime at washingtontimes.com/listen. And make a note of the new call-in number, toll-free at 888-480-JOHN. That's 888-480-5646.
It's hard for me to imagine how they're going to reconcile this scheme as being the byproduct of any recent medical condition. Mr. Jackson engaged in this scheme starting in 2005. It's a 7-year scheme.
Through his illegal actions, he disrespected those who honorably hold roles in public office, and he disrespected the community that elected him. Our citizens deserve better and are entitled to a government free of dishonor and distrust.
In a little more than a month, the High Court will hear arguments on the constitutionality of the California law that forbids same-sex marriage. The Obama administration is contemplating filing a friend of the court brief, urging the court to overturn that ban. In his inaugural speech, the president said that gays and lesbians must be, quote, treated like anyone else under the law.
By corrupting insiders, by hiring hackers, and engaging in other unscrupulous and illegal activities, these entities can inflict devastating harm on individual creators, startups, as well as on major companies.
They can pass an extension of the sequester, a delay of the sequester, just like they did at the end of last year, so that Congress can get the work that it wants to get done.
The bottom line is furloughs would not actually start for DoD employees until late April. And we certainly hope, even if sequestration is triggered on 1 March, we certainly hope that in the interim, Congress will act to de-trigger sequestration.
My credibility as a diplomat working to help other countries create order is strongest when America at last puts its own fiscal house in order.
Now, with common sense for the Commonwealth, here's John Fredericks.
Good Thursday morning and welcome to the John Fredericks Show, Common Sense for the Commonwealth, Virginia's only statewide radio network. Today, Thursday, February 21st, 2013. We're broadcasting from the nation's capital and covering Virginia like the dew. We are the voice of Virginia, the adults in the room. This is the Straight Talk Express Common Sense News Time coming up on 6:13. Your host, John Fredericks, with my executive producer and editorial director, Steve Ray. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing well, and this could possibly be the most important show that folks listen to all month long. With what happened in the General Assembly last night, the conferees coming to a head on a transportation solution. So, this morning, we're packed and fully loaded. Coming up next, former Virginia State Senator Jean Marie Davis. She was part of Governor Bob McDonnell's inner circle as the head of his D.C. office, keeping the states' rights issues at the forefront whenever there were federal mandates. Then at 6:40, we will hear from pilotonline.com and the Virginian pilots, Julian Walker, who covers the State House. At 7:10, the candidate for Virginia Lieutenant Governor GOP nomination, businessman Pete Snyder, one of the Magnificent Seven. At 7:40, Lieutenant Governor Bill Bolling will be with us. At 8:10, from the Virginia General Assembly, the man who put it all together, the Speaker of the House of Delegates, William Howell. And then at 8:40, to help sort it all out, foramerica.org's David Bozell. John?
Quite the lineup, Steve, and a landmark piece of legislation coming out of Richmond. Very exciting for some that take this stuff seriously. For the first time since 1986, the Commonwealth could see a major overhaul in how the state pays for transportation project. This is huge. Negotiators in the House and the Senate reached a compromise early Wednesday. If this is approved by both houses and signed into law by Governor McDonnell, and by the way, he'll be under tremendous pressure to sign this. This plan would completely change the funding structure for roads, rail, and transit in the state. Let me sum it up very quickly, and we're going to go right to Jean Marie Davis. The plan aims to basically replace the 17.5 cents fixed gas tax at the pump with a new 3.5% tax on gas at the wholesale level. That's sort of a VAT tax. Then there's going to be a separate 6% tax that would apply to diesel fuel. That's basically for trucks that go in and out of the state, up and down the interstate. And they also account for a lot more wear and tear. The plan would also increase the sales tax by about 0.3%. And it also will take some money out of the general fund. There's some other things in there, like a $100 fee for alternative fuel vehicles. But the big thing is also provides for a local option for areas like Hampton Roads and Northern Virginia to be able to raise their own revenue for specific regional transportation projects. Now, this compromise, it is a tax increase, no doubt, but this compromise could pump $860 million in additional funds into transportation annually by 2018, and it will bring in $3.5 billion over a 5-year period. The transportation infrastructure in this state is crumbling. It's costing us jobs. It's threatening livelihoods and the economy. But the rhetoric is ratcheting up. Joining us now is former state senator and former House of Delegates member Jean Marie Davis. She is also a candidate for the Republican nomination for Lieutenant Governor. Jean Marie, great to have you with us today.
It's great to be here. Thanks, John.
Always a pleasure. Now, you know what's interesting, Jean Marie, we're excited about having you on early because you were on about 2 weeks ago. We were talking about transportation, and I asked you what your plan was, and you basically said get rid of the 17.5% fixed gasoline tax, go to a wholesale tax, take some money out of the general fund, earmark that, and then fill the gap with maybe another funding source, which now is the percentage in sales tax increase. But this has also got a regional tax component. How do you stand on this whole thing?
Well, I think there are still a couple of concerns that I have about this particular package that I'm hoping, if this should pass, that Governor McDonnell will address as he takes a look at the bill and decides whether to amend it, sign it, or veto it. And the first concern I have is that they haven't put a lockbox around this money, the transportation fund. And from my experience, money's fungible. You can always take it out of here and use it for general fund money and then replace it with debt, which is something that happened during the Gilmore administration and a reason why I voted against the budget that year. So I would really like to see language in the statute that forbids any of the money that is put into either the maintenance or the construction fund for transportation, that it absolutely cannot be used for anything else. And they haven't done that here, so that's a little problematic for me. And the other thing that I'm looking at is this local option. I think that it's been made clear to me as I've traveled around the Commonwealth that outside of Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, people just aren't interested in paying more for our construction, and that's fine. That's why I took the lead and carried a regional bill back in 2007. But this local option, they've removed the requirement for referendum. And I think that that's an important element. It's always been in the statute. This is not new, this local option. That's actually been in the statute for a very long time. But it's always required a referendum so that the people directly determine whether they are going to increase this tax for their own construction needs, and I think that the referendum needs to go back in so that the people are directly determining whether they want to pay more in Northern Virginia and in Hampton Roads for these construction projects. As far as changing the gas tax from an amount per gallon to a percentage, our greatest challenge in transportation is the fact that people are actually using less and less gasoline, and so we've seen fewer and fewer dollars generated from the gas tax, which is why we're in this dilemma. Currently, dollars are being taken from the construction fund and put into the maintenance fund so that we can plow, pave, fill the potholes, mow the grass. And in our statute, the maintenance and operations takes precedence over construction. So in just 4 years, all construction money will be placed in the maintenance fund, and then after that, there will be no construction money left, and there won't be enough money in the maintenance fund. So certainly some action had to be taken in order to generate more revenue. President Obama has just issued new CAFE standards, which means a requirement that new automobiles be even more fuel efficient than the current automobiles, and that means that we will have fewer gas tax dollars coming in because we're charging the 17.5 cents per gallon. So I think by doing it as a percentage, gasoline costs fluctuate. They go up and down and up and down. So in the short term, you'll have an average amount that you bring in. But over the long term, as gasoline prices tend to go up, then we will generate more revenue, or it will remain stable, I would say, with inflation and population growth over time. What I will say is this, for those that are concerned about the gas tax and the way they're doing that now, we have surrounding states whose gas taxes are much higher than ours, but the price per gallon they're paying is exactly the same. And that's because those of us that are, and Republicans believe in marketplace driving the cost of anything. The marketplace is not allowing Maryland, North Carolina to charge any more for gas than we have than the price per gallon here in Virginia. The fact of the matter is that the oil companies that are setting the prices, they're just going to set the price so that we can compete in the marketplace, and there really is not an expectation that this is going to drive up the cost of gasoline. They will have to make adjustments from the oil company side in order to remain competitive and to charge no more for gas than our surrounding states are, and that's what we've seen in North Carolina and Maryland. So I'm not concerned about this driving up gas costs. They will have to make those adjustments. The oil companies will just have to make those adjustments so that they can be competitive in the cost of gasoline.
Senator Davis, do you think that the alternate $100 fuel tax for alternate vehicles does that make sense?
Well, obviously, what they were looking to do is to charge increase the registration fee. We actually have a hybrid in Northern Virginia. This is actually an extra tax for Northern Virginians more than anyone else because you can drive on the HOV lanes as a single driver if you have a special hybrid license plate. And actually what happens in Northern Virginia is our auto dealers charge a premium for those hybrids because they know that they're in demand because people want to be able to drive in the HOV lanes, which allows them to get where they're going quicker during the morning and afternoon rush hour. I think they're using the logic that you're using less gas if you drive a hybrid, so you're not going to see the increase in gas. But once again, I just talked about the marketplace and how I think that we're going to see gasoline prices remain stable, which means that those that drive hybrids and alternative fuel vehicles are going to wind up paying $100 a year more. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure that that's even-handed because I understand the psychology. You're using less gasoline, you're paying less in gas tax, so we're going to assess you this way so you're paying your fair share. And I understand that that's what their logic is. So I guess they were looking for a way for those that drive vehicles that have alternative fuels that are paying much less in gasoline to pay their quote-unquote fair share this way.
Senator Davis, you've outlined some of the concerns you have with this. Here's reality. If you were in the state Senate right now and you've got to make a decision on this up or down as it stands tomorrow, would you hit the green button or the red button?
Well, had I been in the legislature, I would have been working on this bill, and I would have addressed these. I would have addressed these concerns there, and I think that the bill would have looked differently had I been in there because I've done this before, and we've. I just think you have to have a lockbox. I don't trust that the money is not going to be taken and used for something else. And then replaced with debt, as they tried to do back in 1997. So those concerns would have to be addressed for me before I would have been able to vote for this bill.
Is there still time for the House and Senate to amend this to put some of your suggestions in that seem to make sense? Certainly the lockbox does, or is what it is?
Right now it is what it is. It's a conference. It's coming out of conference, and so you cannot amend a conference report on the floor, so they'll have to pass it or not pass it as is, and then but once again it goes to the governor, and the governor has the ability to make some amendments to the bill and send those amendments back down for them to vote up or down. If he amends the bill, let's say he requires a lockbox, and that goes back to the General Assembly, then I suspect the House will vote for it. The challenge you have in the Senate is that the Senate is 2020, and I don't believe constitutionally this is one of those bills that the lieutenant governor can break with I don't think he can vote on it to split the tie vote. And the challenge that you have in the Senate is this. You have 20 Democrats and 20 Republicans, and you're not going to be able to move forward unless the Democrats will vote for this. And that's the dicey issue. And if you don't compromise a little bit with the state senators, then you don't get anything at all. And so you have to then work to get one Democrat senator to come over and vote with the Republicans, and that takes an awful lot of negotiation, but it's not doable.
Common Sense News Time coming up on 6:26 on the John Frederick Show. Editorial Director Steve Ray with John this morning, and we're talking to former Virginia State Senator Jean Marie Davis, who was also a part of Governor McDonnell's inner circle, running his D.C. office to keep the states' rights issues at the forefront whenever we heard of federal mandates. And I would ask you, as we head to the end of this session, which means, of course, we unleash the hounds in terms of fundraising for campaigns. As it goes to your campaign, are you set with your infrastructure and your fundraising levels and abilities to get ready to compete starting Monday bright and early?
Oh, my goodness, Monday bright and early. I mean, we'd never give up a minute. I'm ready to start right now.
Well, you have the advantage, of course, of not serving in an elected office at this point. And as some of our listeners know, but we'll remind them, if you are in the General Assembly or the Lieutenant Governor, even the Governor, if you are in an elected office, you're not allowed to fundraise or actually solicit for any assistance at that point until the end of the session. So I would say, again, how are your coffers, and are you ready to go?
My coffers are doing just fine because, fortunately, I'm not constrained by that legislative rule, and I have been making my phone calls to raise funds every single day. I actually have a wonderful fundraising event coming up on March 4th. Congressman Darrell Issa, Chairman Issa, is supporting my campaign, and he's going to be there. And, of course, he oversees a committee that is important. And that's attracting a lot of attention, and so we are raising lots of money, and I'm very happy about that because it's to run a good convention is easily $400,000, and I'm not going to have a problem meeting those goals.
Well, Congressman Issa is an old friend of mine from California, having spent 20 years in Los Angeles, so good for you. Is that an official endorsement, by the way, Jean Marie?
Well, he said he would do anything he could to help me out, so there you are.
There you are, indeed. John, I think this has been eye-opening, to say the least, in terms of what she could have done or would have done in the state Senate and exactly how this might shake out, a good indicator. Jean Marie, we thank you for the time, as always, Senator Davis, and give them your website, since you're actively campaigning now.
It's JeanMarie4LG.com.
And that is the number 4, correct?
Yes, it is.
All right. Thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it, as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a terrific day. Thanks
You
for coming
too.
on so early.
Thanks.
All
Bye-bye.
right. No commuting issues there. She's calling from the safety of her own home.
One would think she could
Yes.
she could be someplace in a hotel. We have no idea, but we appreciate her coming on early. And there's no question. I think what Senator Davis brought up is really the key issue. There's got to be a lockbox. You hate to hanker back to Al Gore lockbox, but there's got to be a lockbox, because one of the concerns that any conservative is going to have is, we don't want to pay this tax, but then the problem is we're going to expand the government, and where's that money going to go? Got to be a lockbox. Jean Marie Davis.
Coming up on 6:30 here on the John Frederick Show, our window on the weather is brought to you by Renewal by Andersen Windows. Save $1,000 on Renewal by Andersen replacement windows now. Call them at 800-779-4700. Another chilly day around the Commonwealth. 28 degrees now, with highs reaching the mid-40s midday in Virginia Beach at WHKT. 27 degrees with highs only in the mid-40s for Richmond and Central Virginia at WLEE. 31 degrees right now with highs in the upper 40s midday in Lynchburg and Roanoke at our newest affiliate, WBRG. And 26 degrees, highs in the upper 30s in the nation's capital here at our flagship station, WTNT. Common Sense Time coming up on 6:30. On the way for us from the Virginian Pilot, the man who covers the State House, Julian Walker, joins us in just a moment. Now, time for Commonwealth Headlines with Ken Johnson. Good morning, Ken.
Good morning, John and Steve. Good morning, everybody. One of the largest military contractors in the Commonwealth, BAE Systems Ship Repair, has sent letters to employees in Norfolk and 4 other states saying that they may have to lay off more than 3,500 people if the Navy cuts $4.6 billion in ship repairs this year. As many as 1,600 workers in Norfolk alone can be laid off. Any decision on whether to formally notify workers that they are being discharged will hinge on whether the Navy follows through with plans to cancel almost $500 million in ship repairs from April to September because of the budget shortfall. Pentagon officials say they are reviewing an Esquire magazine article on a Navy SEAL's account of his role in the May 2011 raid that killed Osama bin Laden to determine whether the account discloses any classified information. The identity of the SEAL is not revealed in the Esquire article, but the team involved in the raid is based in Virginia Beach. As for information leaked, it may be too late since the article was published online February the 11th. The account is not the first to portray details of the raid. Former SEAL Matt Bissonnette, writing under the pseudonym Mark Owen, described the operation in his book, No Easy Day, published last September. While the Pentagon objected to what it called his unwarranted disclosures, no legal action has been taken against him. After a great deal of political wrangling and debate over numerous proposals, a deal to generate an additional $880 million for state road building efforts was sealed between the two small groups of legislators who have been negotiating the plan over the past 4 days. Compromise legislation converts Virginia's 17.5 cents per gallon motor fuels tax to wholesale taxes on gas and diesel, increases to 5.3% the state sales tax, imposes higher registration fees on alternative fuel vehicles, and raises the titling tax on automobile sales. The package also includes regional funding components for Hampton Roads in Northern Virginia to be paid for with additional wholesale gas and sales tax hikes in those regions. There's also a $100 fee on alternative fuel vehicles such as hybrids and a rate increase on the titling tax on car sales. When Virginians go to the polls to cast their votes after July 1st, 2014, they will have to present a photo identification card, such as a driver's license or student ID card issued by a university, under a bill that passed the General Assembly yesterday. If someone does not have a photo ID, the measure requires the local registrar's office to provide one. The bill, passed the House largely along party lines, still requires approval from Governor Bob McDonnell. Legislation pushed by Governor McDonnell to allow the state to take over chronically failing schools has received final General Assembly approval. The Senate previously passed the measure on a tie-breaking vote by Lieutenant Governor Bill Bolling. It now goes to McDonnell for his signature. Louisiana's Recovery School District served as the model for the proposal to create an opportunity education institution to take control of failing schools and try to turn them around. 6 schools currently meet the criteria for state takeover, most of them in Norfolk. In Louisiana, 77% of students in New Orleans were attending failing schools in 2005. That's been reduced to 29% now. The House has voted to repeal the 1950 Virginia law making it illegal for unmarried couples to live together. While the law calls for a $500 fine for a first offense up to a year in jail for subsequent infractions, unmarried couples living together have rarely been prosecuted in recent years. Besides, the U.S. Supreme Court has deemed the law unconstitutional. The bill will now go to Governor McDonnell, who has said he supports the repeal. State and local news brought to you by the Chris Weaver Real Estate Team, your Virginia real estate leader. Whether you're buying, selling, or leasing, get it done by the team that gets it done right. ChrisWeaver.com. KRISWeaver.com.
WTNT Traffic and Weather brought to you by Washington's Best Tennis Boot Camp. Find it at rjtennis.com. That's rjtennis.com.
Traffic brought to you by Dymatap. Big problem northbound on I-95. Accident just before you get to the Beltway exits in Springfield. Left half of the roadway is tied up. 2 lanes get you by to the right. Delays coming through Dale City towards the Occoquan River, and then bumper-to-bumper traffic as you head from Lorton through Newington and up towards the Beltway. On the Beltway in Annandale and Alexandria, things are in good shape. 395 still quiet inside the Beltway to the 14th Street Bridge. Accident reported northbound on 210 at the Beltway in Oxon Hill. Beltway north of town slowing from University Boulevard most of the way over towards Georgia Avenue, but with all of your lanes open. Southbound 270, earlier accident at 85 is out of the way. This cold and flu season, choose Dymatap to help your kids feel better. Fast, effective relief of cold, cough, and flu symptoms. Dymatap has formulas you can trust, including Dymatap Cold and Cough and Dymatap Multi-Symptom Cold and Flu, each with a great grape taste. Breathe easier with Dymatap. I'm Robert Workman with WTNT Traffic.
I own a replacement window company, and I'm saying don't replace all your windows right now. I'm Kevin Shakin, one of the local owners of Renewal by Andersen. In this weather, customers are replacing only their very worst windows. So how do you determine your draftiest windows? Renewal by Andersen conducts an in-home thermal draft detector test, and with our infrared technology, we pinpoint your most energy-wasting windows. The test is free, and when you replace your 5 worst windows, you save $1,000 with 0 money down, 0 payments, and 0 interest for 1 year. Get a free thermal draft detector test and save $1,000. For a free Renewal by Andersen brochure or DVD, call 1-800-779-4700. 1-800-779-4700. 1-800-779-4700. That's 1-800-779-4700.
Offer not available in all areas.
Contractors in Northern Virginia already feel the chill of sequestration? Learn how to diversify and adapt to new economic realities during the Prince William Chambers GovCon Industry Day on Friday, March 8th. Visit www.govconday.com to view the agenda, including keynotes by Sean Crean, Director of Navy Small Business Programs, and noted economist Dr. Stephen Fuller. Register today at www.govconday.com.
Higher debt ceilings, higher taxes, more government spending, and even more traffic on our roads. The stakes are getting higher for us, but the politics in Washington and Richmond are getting smaller and more petty. Hear the latest? Liberal career politician Dick Saslaw, the Virginia Senate Democrat leader, says any hope of solving Virginia's transportation problems is dead on arrival. He won't even try. Why? Because Dick Saslaw puts insider politics over solving our transportation problems. That's not just wrong, it's pathetic. Saslaw and the Democrats should be ashamed. No wonder people are sick and tired of career politicians and politics as usual. It's time for a change. An outsider, technology entrepreneur Pete Snyder is just the guy to get the job done. Pete Snyder is a job creator, an innovator, a conservative problem solver. Pete Snyder for Lieutenant Governor.
Paid for and authorized by Pete Snyder for Lieutenant Governor.
Is now the time for me to buy a house? And can I afford it? Great questions. Keep asking them until you're sure you know the answer. Join Joe Arroyo, Dave Ramsey's financial coach for D.C. and Virginia, and daily radio show host for a Buy Smart, Borrow Smart Homebuyer Workshop, February 28th at Tyson's. Learn about buying versus renting, how much home you can afford, how to find big value buys, market changes for 2013, navigating the loan process, and what to expect from day one to closing. Go to buysmartborrowsmart.com to register now. buysmartborrowsmart.com. The workshop is free, but space is limited. buysmartborrowsmart.com. Register early for a chance to win a $500 IKEA gift card. Everyone leaves with a valuable gift, along with the knowledge to buy with confidence and financial peace of mind. Go to buysmartborrowsmart.com now. Register and join Joe this February 28th at Tyson's.
For news you won't find anywhere else, turn to the pages of the Washington Times for exclusive coverage of the budget crisis, defense, national security, and more. Much more. The Washington Times brings you news and opinion on issues often ignored by the mainstream media. For home delivery, call 202-636-3333 or visit WashingtonTimes.com. The Washington Times and WashingtonTimes.com. Fearless reporting, American values.
With common sense for the Commonwealth, it's the John Fredericks Morning Show. Like us on Facebook. Follow John on the new Twitter handle @JF Radio Show. And online, the website, thejohnfredericsshow.com. Listen online anywhere, anytime at washingtontimes.com/listen. And make a note of the new call-in number, toll-free at 888-480-JOHN. That's 888-480-5646.
It's hard for me to imagine how they're going to reconcile this scheme as being the byproduct of any recent medical condition. Mr. Jackson engaged in this scheme starting in 2005. It's a 7-year scheme.
Through his illegal actions, he disrespected those who honorably hold roles in public office, and he disrespected the community that elected him. Our citizens deserve better and are entitled to a government free of dishonor and distrust.
In a little more than a month, the High Court will hear arguments on the constitutionality of the California law that forbids same-sex marriage. The Obama administration is contemplating filing a friend of the court brief, urging the court to overturn that ban. In his inaugural speech, the president said that gays and lesbians must be, quote, treated like anyone else under the law.
By corrupting insiders, by hiring hackers, and engaging in other unscrupulous and illegal activities, these entities can inflict devastating harm on individual creators, startups, as well as on major companies.
They can pass an extension of the sequester, a delay of the sequester, just like they did at the end of last year, so that Congress can get the work that it wants to get done.
The bottom line is furloughs would not actually start for DoD employees until late April. And we certainly hope, even if sequestration is triggered on 1 March, we certainly hope that in the interim, Congress will act to de-trigger sequestration.
My credibility as a diplomat working to help other countries create order is strongest when America at last puts its own fiscal house in order.
Now, with common sense for the Commonwealth, here's John Fredericks.
Good Thursday morning. Welcome back to the John Fredericks Show, Common Sense for the Commonwealth, Virginia's only statewide radio network. We're broadcasting from the nation's capital and blasting our way through Virginia. This is the voice of Virginia for the adults in the room. Hey, joining us now is Virginian pilot, Richmond correspondent, chief correspondent Julian Walker. And Steve, can I give Julian just a quick shout out? Is that
sure?
Is
you
that
can
legal?
do that.
Can I do that?
Absolutely,
hey,
because
Julian,
I was going to do that as well because I really enjoy following him on Twitter at Pilot on Politics. So I was going to give a shout out as well. So
we can give a dual shout out.
All right, give it out, babe.
It's like the Julian Walker Day. Right,
it
right
should
here on
be.
The John Fredericks Show.
Yep.
I got to tell you, Julian Walker, you can read him. Just go to Pilot Online, Julian Walker, Pilot on Politics. If you're interested in what's going on in the state, especially in the General Assembly, there's one guy that I follow every day. That's Julian Walker. I just go to Pilot Online, Julian Walker. I get the best updates. I get it straight. I get straight talk, and I get an inside view of what's happening. So I would encourage anybody to go to Pilot Online, Julian Walker. Julian, great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the love this morning. It almost makes up for feeling sick and once again being knocked out by the germs that are floating around the General Assembly.
Now, are we talking about the actual members of the General Assembly, or are we talking about a rampant flu that's been unleashed in Richmond besides spending?
I already had. I'm not talking about members or the illness of perhaps excessive spending. I'm talking about actual viral and bacterial germs.
Well, you know what? There seems to be a pattern because the last time we had you on, we actually had to move you to a Monday from a Friday booking because you had almost lost your voice due to something similar. So I would suggest go down to Kmart, get yourself laminated head to toe, and use a lot of hand cleanser.
Absolutely. I need a protective bodysuit. That makes sense.
Exactly.
Right,
go to the TSA. I'm sure they'll figure out something for you. Julian, lots going on at the State House late last night, and we thank you for getting up so early. John, take it away, and let's break this thing down.
Julian, pretty interesting. Really, for the first time in a quarter century, Virginia could see a major overhaul in how the state pays for transportation projects. And we've got a new proposal on the table that House and Senate conferees reached a potential compromise. This could raise $860 million annually, dedicated hopefully to transportation, $3.5 billion over a 5-year period. How did this happen?
Well, it took them 4 days of negotiation, and you have to think and you have to give credit to Governor Bob McDonnell. This is something that Bob McDonnell swung for the fences at the beginning of this session. There were some people who were skeptical of whether or not something could get done because he rolled this idea out so late and because while he had proposed transportation initiatives in previous sessions, this is effectively his last year in office, and some people, candidly, even members of his own party, had grumbled that he didn't do enough advanced salesmanship on this. But he swung for the fences in his last year, and he may, in fact, there's a chance, I won't say it's a guarantee at this point, but he may, in fact, get a bill to his desk. Now, as we report this morning, there's still a significant hurdle that this bill has to overcome. It has to get out of the House, get 51 votes in the 100-member House. That is a chamber with a two-thirds Republican majority. All 100 of those seats are up for re-election this year, and there are a number of tax-averse Republicans in that chamber. So the normally marginalized House Democratic caucus is suddenly relevant because their 32 votes have some power now, because Republicans and the Speaker will need to rely on them in order to get this thing out of the House. Remember, the Speaker carried this bill in its earlier form, and it only passed the House with 53 or 54 votes, as I recall. So it narrowly got out of the House. And likewise in the Senate. I mean, you've got 20 Democrats over there and 20 Republicans. It's an evenly divided chamber. Republican Lieutenant Governor Bill Bolling has already signaled support for this. However, you've got tax-averse Republicans over there. They're not on the ballot this year, but you have tax-averse Republicans in the Senate. And you have some Democrats that think that elements of this plan aren't strong enough, aren't reliable enough. So, and then in Hampton Roads, you've got some Democrats that say it doesn't do enough to provide toll relief on the Midtown-downtown tunnel. So you've got, this isn't a typical straight-down-the-middle partisan vote. There are a lot of moving pieces here and a lot of things that have to be overcome for this bill to get to the governor's desk.
So a lot of wrangling is going to be going on, essentially get out of the House, though, if we can assume they're going to probably get the majority of House delegates to back this. There's 32 of them. Maybe they get 30 or whatever. They're probably going to need 21 Republicans, but still very difficult to do. Why don't we go to the regional taxing piece of it, where Northern Virginia or Hampton Roads, if you will, would be able to put in a supplemental regional transportation tax. But the way it's written now, that can be done without a referendum. Does that have legs?
Well, I mean, that's part of the bill. It's embedded in the framework of the legislation as it's been revised. So if the bill passes and the governor signs it, then that becomes the law of the state. Now, a couple things to bear in mind very quickly. If this gets to the governor's desk, oftentimes the governor will amend bills that he conceptually supports but doesn't like particular elements. He wants to add his kind of finishing brushstrokes to it. This is the kind of bill where, because of how difficult it may be to get it to pass, he may not be able to tinker with it at all. And he may have to resist that temptation, because if he tinkers with it, then it goes back to the legislature, and that could shatter the whole fragile deal potentially here. But yeah, specifically, as you mentioned, it would allow regions in Hampton Roads and Northern Virginia to impose some additional local taxes. In Hampton Roads, it would be an additional sales tax, an additional wholesale gas tax, and those monies would be used to build local priority transportation projects, which would be determined. The list would be set by the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization. So that's how that would work. And in Hampton Roads, there's also language, although it seems fuzzy right now, about toll mitigation. But exactly how that would work is still being devised a little bit.
From pilotonline.com and the Virginian Pilot, we're speaking to State House correspondent Julian Walker. And Julian, I want to back up 2 steps here. For those listeners who are not familiar with the process, we know that there is 2 days ahead of work in this short session before it adjourns. Can you explain briefly, and maybe make it analogous to a line item veto, if the governor does tinker with this, and it has to go back to the House to approve those tinkers, as you put it, not being late about this at all, but is there an explanation you can give to listeners for how that process might work, and if there is a time deadline involved with that once the short session ends and they only have that one workday additional in early April?
Well, right. The way it works is this, very briefly. if the governor they have what are called 7-day bills and 30-day bills. If the governor, typically legislation that comes to the governor while the legislature is still in session is a 7-day bill, which means he has 7 days to decide on whether or not to sign it, to veto it, to amend it, and send it back to the legislature. As you correctly point out, the scheduled end of the 2013 General Assembly session is Saturday, although it would not be out of character for them to go into overtime as they have done just about every year for the past decade. So they may be here a few days late. Then they have what are called 30-day bills. Those are bills that essentially come to him at the end of session while they're not still in session or as they're adjourning. Those bills are the bills that he has a month to act on, and so those bills, and I would imagine the transportation bill would fall into that category, those bills he would have essentially a month to work on, and then when they come back in early April, as you point out, for the reconvene session, they would take up any amendments, if he makes them, to a transportation bill at that point.
That makes it much clearer. Thank you, Julian, for that. John?
Now, Julian, Lieutenant Governor Bill Bolling, the Republican, right now he presides over the Senate. Technically, he can be a tie-breaking vote at any time, except on the budget. So my question is, does this bill fall under that category, or could indeed the lieutenant governor vote and break a tie?
It is my understanding that the way the Constitution reads, it's not just budget bills, it's revenue bills. And this is a revenue bill, so this would be a bill that he would be ineligible to break a tie on.
So he could jawbone, lobby, cajole, talk to, but at the end of the day, if it's a 2020 tie, it's going to go down in flames because the lieutenant governor can't weigh in, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is my understanding, that the bill would fail to report on a 2020 tie unless, they are devising some different strategy. But the way the Constitution reads and the way that the lieutenant governor's office has interpreted it, any passage of the Constitution, and there are a couple instances, the election of judges is another, where it says must be voted on by a majority of members elected. He is not a member elected of the General Assembly.
Right.
And so in all of those instances, he is prevented from casting a tie-breaking vote, and revenue bills are in that category.
And Julian, before we let you go, I'll wrap up with one final question here. And we realize that you do not opine for the most part, but I will ask your insight. Let's put it that way. Is this the time for Dick Saslaw to flex his muscle and possibly block this bill?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's the time. I think that's a very valid question, though. Listen, this is money for Northern Virginia. This is money for Hampton Roads. Now, is it the vehicle that Democrats would prefer? No. Or all Democrats would prefer, I should say? No. Is it the vehicle that all Republicans would prefer? No. The question is, and this is a difficult one to answer, and it's one that each individual legislator has to answer, particularly those from Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, can you reject this thing, be part of the reason that it potentially goes down, and explain that to your constituents who sit in traffic on highways every day? Now, for the members of the Senate, they're not up for election for another couple years, so it may not be as tough an explaining job for them. For members of the House, they are on the ballot this November. They might have more explaining to do because they face the voters in 8 months. So,
well, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for the insight. We appreciate it. From PilotOnline.com and the Virginian Pilot newspaper, State House correspondent Julian Walker. Follow him on Twitter, as I do, at Pilot on Politics. Julian, thanks so much. Hope you feel better, buddy.
Thank you.
All right, great to have you on. On the way for us, we'll tell you who's coming up here on the John Frederick Show on this very important morning. It happens to include the very people we were talking about, the Speaker of the House of Delegates, William Howell, and the Lieutenant Governor, Bill Bolling. All straight ahead here on the John Frederick Show at 6:54, Common Sense News Time.
The career politicians in Richmond, they don't know Pete Snyder because Pete is not one of them. So it annoys Democratic Party boss Dick Saslaw when Pete Snyder takes him on. Listen.
State Senator Dick Saslaw, live from Richmond.
Who is Pete Snyder? Candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Virginia on the GOP side.
Oh,
Never heard of him.
How's that again?
Never heard of him.
Right. The Richmond political insiders haven't heard of Pete Snyder. Until now. Snyder is an outsider, a job creator who helped launch an entire industry right here in Virginia. Playing insider games? Nope. Pete Snyder's been too busy creating jobs and fighting for conservative solutions here in Virginia. Now Snyder is taking the fight to the career politicians. Pete's ready to shake up Richmond and fight for real conservative reforms. Pete Snyder for Lieutenant Governor. Conservative, job creator, outsider.
Paid for and authorized by Pete Snyder for Lieutenant Governor.
Your morning fix includes a cup of coffee, but it's still missing something. RedState.com's Morning Briefing, a must-read for policymakers and those in the grassroots of the conservative movement. Eric Erickson, the editor of RedState.com, the #1 conservative to follow on Twitter, according to both Politics Daily and Politico. Publishing at 4:45 every morning, not only reporting the news, but breaking news. Sign up for free now. Go to RedState.com/Morning Briefing. This is the John Fredericks Morning Show, Common Sense for the Commonwealth, powered by the Washington Times. For breaking news and updates on the latest throughout the day for Virginia, the nation, and the world, go to WashingtonTimes.com.
Welcome back to the John Fredericks Show. I tell you what, the rhetoric on the transportation compromise is ratcheting up again. My right-wing friends going crazy, calling this the biggest tax increase in the history of man. Here's the bottom line. Those conservatives who are deriding Virginia's transportation pending deal are peddling a delusional response to a landmark transportation reform package that is finally aimed at addressing this state's economic crippling 30-year transportation debacle. This is reality government. The failure to find now and fund a serious solution to our roads and traffic congestion dilemma is threatening the entire long-term financial stability of Virginia. Look, Democrats control half the state's Senate in Virginia. If we can't find and fund about $2 billion annually in infrastructure improvements that include major capital investments in Virginia in new roads, bridges, and tunnels, we will simply continue to repel business growth. We're going to force companies to move out. We're going to lock out new companies from coming in. We're not going to be able to take advantage of the opportunity to get the increased shipping business in from the widening of the Panama Canal, and it is going to eventually shrink the economic pie down in Virginia to such a state that the state is going to go bankrupt. Now, these Republican right-wing sound bites, my friends, jumping up and down and beating their chest about no new taxes, Republicans sold out, they might be politically expedient, but they defy reality, deny logic, and decry common sense. You simply can't fund $2 billion annually from Virginia's general fund. I commend the governor for displaying the guts to force this issue and to finally, potentially, get a real solution in this General Assembly. Denial of this compromise is economic suicide for short-term, feel-good political gain. We need a transportation plan in Virginia. This is the John Fredericks Show.
And if you've just joined us, you've missed out on a great show so far already. In the first hour, we heard from State Senator Jean Marie Davis and the Virginian pilot's Julian Walker. On the way for us, candidate for Virginia Lieutenant Governor's GOP nomination, businessman Pete Snyder. We will hear at 7:40 from the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Bill Bolling. Then at 8:10, from the General Assembly, the Speaker of the House of Delegates, William Howell. All here on The John Fredericks Show.